Work out okay. A couple of minutes ago, thinking about this, I said, there are too many different ideas which are going together. I don't know whether they will hold together as nicely as I thought. I received a book for review called The Origin of the Jews, The Quest for Roots in a Rootless Age. And I noticed very quickly that it included an item that I've been working on for many years, having to do with how individuals, especially in the southwestern part of the United States, think about identity as being descendants from crypto-Jews and what their foundation story is all about. I've spent an awful lot of time thinking and working on this topic, and I was very happy to combine it with the notion of the origin of the Jews, looking at the parsha that we're about to read. One of the very last Rashis is on V'lo natan Hashem lachem lev ladat ve'einayim lirot ve'oznayim lishmoa ad hayom hazeh. Until this day, the Lord has not given you a heart to know, eyes to see, and ears to hear. And Rashi says on until this day, he says, I heard on that very day, Rashi is looking forward, that the Torah was going to be given to the Levian, and all of Israel said, no, give the Torah to all of us. And then looking backwards, he says, this day you have become a people to the Lord your God. I'm looking at a few other verses in the Torah reading. We have a number of locations in this week's Torah reading where one could decide that it meant not only this day you will become a people, but there's also a verse towards the beginning after Moses speaking after the discussion of the basket of the first fruits. He says, Hayom hazeh Hashem Elokecha, etc. And then he says, V'et Hashem he'amarta hayom. Some of the translations I looked at said, you have selected the Lord this day to be your God, and God has selected you to be this day. It's based a lot on the fact that this word mircha is a very strange word, and there are a number of different discussions. I looked recently at some of the Rashis and the translations into Aramaic and into Arabic by Sadi Gaon. Many of them are very strange, but if we count the selection and the thing at the very, that Rashi points out and the line at the end, 3 times we have a reference to the people of Israel becoming a people not with Abraham, not with the Exodus, not at Sinai, but on the plains of Moab when Moses is speaking. This is a very interesting beginning story, and one that's not exactly the same that most of us think about. My late father idolized Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin is famous for having said that every child in Israel knows the beginning story of the people of Israel, and he quoted the story of Moses. That or the fathers or the ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so on, is much more common. Now, how does this relate? I'll bring that back at the very end of my talk. What about the origin of the Jews? I'm glad that I promised myself I would open the book and talk about it a little bit at this talk, because I need to write a review, and without promising myself it might not have been done. I read very carefully what he had to say about, this is by Stephen Weitzman, who has taught a full career at Indiana University. He talks about genealogy as providing an origin story for crypto-Jews and a number of other people. I'll come back to that in a moment. His next chapter is entitled Roots in a Rootless World, and this is a linguistic analysis, linguistic roots, roots of Hebrew language and how they relate to other things. He talks about the so-called documentary hypothesis and archaeology. He even mentions psychology, jumping off from some discredited theories about, by Freud and some of his successors. He talks about Hellenism and the response to Hellenism creating Judaism, and certainly the response to Hellenism helped create Judaism as we know it today, in terms of the response, canonizing scripture and talking about scripture and creating pietism as a response to Hellenizers and pietism, Hasidut, the first usage of Hasidut as a kind of Jewish movement. commitment to Shabbat, commitment to Milah, commitment to Chodesh, and so on. Certainly jumping off of tradition, but going on. It's an interesting chapter. He also talks about DNA and about something that I'm talking about in one of my classes, the modern invention of Judaism as we know it today. Not based on this book, but another book. Lior Batnitsky has argued that the Romantic philosophers of Central Europe in the 17th and especially 18th and 19th century created the category of religion, and that has reshaped how we think about Judaism as a religion today in practical terms. Now, how does this relate to the crypto-Jews? I've always wondered about the crypto-Jews, how they think about transmitting their identity. One of the first things that struck me is that in, I will say, our community, but it's not only the modern Orthodox, in the more traditional Orthodox, and the conservative, and the Reform, many people worry about whether our children and grandchildren will be Jewish. Day school, camps, kosher restaurants, study, going to Israel, whatever it is. There are many, many ways in which we worry about whether our descendants will be Jewish. One of the most striking things about the crypto-Jews is that they really do have this kind of genealogical foundation story, which means that they are much less, as a whole, the community that I've been working with as a whole is much less worried about what to do to have their children remain in the framework of Judaism that they have found. In many cases, the foundation story goes like this. Our ancestors were Jews, they were forced to become Catholics. Usually this group is Hispanic background, so they talk about the Spanish Inquisition, and they secretly observed Judaism. That's part of the narrative. But increasingly the genealogical and these last 10 years, the genetics notion has taken over how they look at things, so that they no longer emphasize the secret preservation of Jewish customs as much as our ancestors were Jews. In a talk I gave recently, I contrasted a song that was famous among Yiddishists, which I am not, Zog Moran, Say O Morano, what do you do on Pesach? It's a Yiddish song, and this Morano keeps Passover in secret. That's how he defines Yiddishkeit. But as I said, the group that I'm working with more and more has a genealogical and even genetic definition. I'm going to come back to our psukim. Our psukim tell us a number of things. The Rashis and the other commentaries I looked at recently on the 3 psukim that I talked about say, you became a people at the time of Moab because it took you 40 years to learn, to do and not to fetch. Moses says all those times you were complaining, and now you're actually learning, you're going to do. Or he says, every day you have to look at the Torah as being brand new and something that's vibrant. Again, an idea that vibrant Torah and a vibrant everyday idea about Judaism, that's the true origin story, not something ancient in the past. I could go on, but I am going to stop right here with the hope that in my Father's memory, all of us, and myself included, will think about our tradition as being something that is stop fetching and doing, and something that every day I will look at as something new